Suppose you are a healer and an injured man stumbles into your infirmary, but you know immediately that he is a wanted fugitive, and saving his life would start a war and ruin everything you've ever worked for. What would you do? Would you turn him away? Pineapple. A long time ago in a faraway land, an elderly healer, Makoni, co-founder of a nation's renowned infirmary, the Healer's Grove, suspected that her newest recruit was harboring a dangerous secret. The suspicion had not been so much her own thinking, but it had been the young trainee potion maker, Ipai, who had come and said to her, "Great healer Makoni, you have always said to come to you whenever we had a challenge, or whenever our gut or our visions told us something would harm the sanctity of this our home, the Healer's Grove. See, I do not mean to be a snitch, but in the last 2 days, I have seen that Yamurai, the newest recruit, has been moving sketchily. Perhaps it is something that I can investigate, but under your order, of course." Ordinarily, Makoni would not have concerned herself with the rumors and the whispers of the grove, for they were plenty, and each day brought new finger pointings, blame shiftings, and grapevine lies and truths that Makoni had no desire to entertain, especially as she was growing older and her body was now deteriorating. But once the potion maker had mentioned her name, Yemurai, Makoni's hackles had risen, and again the healer had tried to remember something important, a prophecy, a vision from long back, something that had stirred within her the morning Yemurai had turned up with her mother at the Healer's Grove, fleeing accusations of witchcraft. She knew, Makoni, that there was something about the girl, but ever since the girl had arrived a moon ago, that vision, that prophecy flitted across her young mind, but refused to be grasped. So Makoni told Ipai to watch the girl for the rest of the day, and if his suspicions remained, then they would investigate thoroughly that night. And when Ipai came to knock on her door in the dead of the night, he was frantic and excited. "She is in the kitchen. She is preparing food at this hour. There is something definitely going on. Come, hurry." And Makoni had forced her arthritic joints to stand, ignored the crack of her spine and back, and rubbed as many furs as she could over her body to keep the never-ending old age cold away. Then she allowed Ipai to lead her to the girl's hut, right at the edge of the Healer's Grove, the first hut they had built aeons ago, and a hut that had been Makoni's home for a long time. Yet as Makoni painfully put one leg after the other, she could not shake the strong feelings of trepidation that threatened to swallow her. Yes, she no longer had visions now. Yes, her sense of foreboding had disappeared that fateful night too, but her instincts were never wrong, and they whispered to her now that something was about to happen, something was about to shift, and that something lay beyond the door of her old heart. The jeweler did not knock. Ipai had simply opened the way for Makoni to walk towards the door, and with all the energy in her brittle body, Makoni shoved the door open, and in that instant, she froze in horror at the sight before her, for Yemurai was helping an injured man sit up, not in the infirmary like an ordinary patient, but in your heart. And for two, this man was wanted. He was a fugitive. He had attacked an incumbent prince regent fighting for the crown. And what was worse too was that the newcomer Yemurai had gone against the grove's no stranger policy and brought a stranger into the infirmary. And now as she stood there, Makoni's memories of the vision that had tugged at her brain since the last moon came rushing back to her. "Yemurai," Makoni said finally, as her senses returned and as she realized she needed to deal with the mattermost agent to her now. "Yemurai," she repeated again, "what is going on here? Who is this patient in your heart that I do not know?" "Hi, Yemu." Yemu's already big eyes grew wider until they hid her forehead, and as she looked from Makoni to Ipai, to the patient who she was trying to help sit up, and to Makoni again, she could see the admonishment in Makoni's eyes compete with horror, and Yemu knew that this was the time to come clean. I I saw him by the river yesterday, Makoni, the young healer in training said. He was badly injured, and I could not just leave him there. I was afraid if I told you, you would chase me away. I had hoped that he would be okay and be on his way soon, before anyone would discover him. Makoni saw the fear in the girl's eyes, and so too the sincerity, and she was deflated. She knew the girl's story, a story similar to hers even, of how the girl had been accused of witchcraft in her home, and how everyone else wanted her to be punished, and how the king had threatened to throw her in the dungeons. The girl's mother, who had fled with her daughter from the harsh punishment, had begged, "Please take her in. The dungeons will strangle the life out of my daughter, and she has done no one wrong. Please, take her. You are my family's last resort." And though Makoni knew that there was no space in the grove for another student, she could not turn the girl away. And two, she had dismissed the foreboding in her mind, the intuition that told her that something was to happen, and she accepted the girl into the healer's grove. And now, as she stood by the door with her bent back, Makoni knew that although the crime this girl had committed could only lead to expulsion from the grove, she also understood that if she sent the girl back into the world with her gift still untamed, then she would be pillaged, and her innocent, do-good heart would be shattered forever. So instead, she stared intensely at Yemurai and asked, "Who else knows?" Yemu was at odds. She did not want her friend to get into trouble, yet she could see Makoni's eyes probing, piercing into hers, and knew that the old healer would decipher a lie the moment she told it, so she half whispered, "Matirasa." Ipai was sent to wake the young healer who had provided Yemu, whose knowledge of potions was still very novice, with herbs. Matirasa, the young beautiful healer, was already crying the moment she walked into the hut. "I told her to tell you. I told her. Please, I did not do anything wrong." But Makoni spoke. "Hush! Quiet! I don't want to hear it. Now, with your friend and Ipai here, I want the three of you to promise me that you will not say anything of the stranger's presence to anyone in this grove ever." She looked at each of them in turn, and they all cowed before her, each mumbling, "I promise." Then the older healer spoke again. "Now, all three of you, help each other carry this man to my heart." They heaved and puffed the delirious man, who one moment would open his eyes and in a very low voice would say, take me home," as they took him to Makoni's hut. Makoni, with her slow pace, arrived after they had laid him on a reed mat in her hut, and as Matirasa, who was the most skilled in healing amongst the three of them, was already peering at his wounds. They all stood as Makoni walked in and set herself by the fire. Once Makoni had stopped breathing heavily from all the walking, and once she could feel the heat start to seep into her old bones, she said to Matirasa, "Since you have been the one taking care of his wounds, you shall continue to do so until he recuperates. You," she turned to Ipai, "you shall guard this man, surreptitiously of course, until he is better, and we release him back into the world. And you," she turned to Yemu, "go back to your heart, go to your classes, pretend like this never happened, but know for sure that the punishment for your refusal to follow the grove's instructions and for bringing a stranger into our home is coming your way. I shall be watching your problematic behind now more closely." Makoni watched as the girl bowed her head to mumble her apologies again, and as she walked out of the hut, and the healer could not help but shiver, despite the warmth of the fire beside her. She waited patiently for Matirasa to dab the wounds with potions. Then, as she fed the delirious patient with as much soup as he could stomach, then when he dozed off, the young healer bade the grove's founder good night, and left together with Ipai. And only when she was alone with the sleeping man did Makoni sigh, then close her eyes to the vision that had only visited her once and never again. She, Makoni, had been young then, and the grove had just been born, and they had admitted only one patient since it had been founded. So your co-founders Murapi and Muwani had gone to the forest to collect herbs for their potions, but they had left Makoni tending to the patient. And somehow Makoni had drifted off and began reminiscing about the home she had fled from. And as she thought of her home and how she missed its heartiness and warmth, the vision had descended quickly, without warning, and engulfed her so totally that she forgot everything and was immersed in it. And she saw a young girl marching towards Makoni's heart, with glee glowing across her face. Then behind her, a stranger, a young man, following her in hot pursuit. He wore several crowns on his head, and his robes were a deep, deep red. And even though he were in a hurry, Makoni could tell he was a very powerful man, a man people listened to, a man who commanded earth and space. But as he got closer, Makoni saw his face was gold, his cheeks sunken, his eyes hollow and haunted, as though they had seen the greatest horror ever. By the time he came to stand before Makoni, the girl had already arrived, looking meekly into the healer's eyes, and then she looked up. And the man looked down, and he touched the girl's shoulder, and the girl laughed. And as though the laughter was lightning, it shook the grove, and cracks began to appear, and these became fissures, then gorges with cliffs, until Makoni was so separated from the grove, and no matter what she did to reach out to her colleagues on the other side who were watching in horror, the abyss was too deep. She would never be able to cross it. Then she had looked at the girl again, wanting to tell her to stop laughing, but the girl was now holding the calabash, one of the only two prized possessions Makoni had managed to salvage from her home before she ran. Makoni had then tried to grab the calabash, but the girl was sprightly and leapt this way and that, and then she had laughed and made as if to hand Makoni her calabash. But the moment Makoni's outstretched hand drew closer and her fingertips grazed the calabash, the girl's hand snatched it away and then laughed again before placing the calabash underneath her armpit, reached out for the young man's hand, and the two had turned and ran away towards where they had come from, their laughter harmonizing, synchronizing, and seemingly mocking Makoni. Then, as quickly as the vision had appeared, as quickly also had it dissipated, and Makoni jerked to the present to find herself wet and drenched to the core with sweat. Makoni had never told anyone of the vision after that, although for the longest time she had wondered what it meant. And as the years had gone by, she had, bit by bit, dismissed the vision until she had forgotten all about it. But now, here she was, with a young woman and a strange man in her grove, all who had come in the past moon. And why had the girl in her visions held Makoni's own calabash? Would she be the replacement? Would she be the new leader? And why had her love caused fishes? Would her presence here destroy the grove, the one thing that she had built with diligence and hard work? And these questions, and there are hundreds and unanswered, haunted Makoni all night long and into the early morning. By morning, she knew what had to be done. The mantle had to be passed. She was too old to worry about the grove. All she wanted was a quick delivery to her ancestors, but they seemed to have forgotten she existed, because why were they not taking her when everyone else had gone? But she decided that for now it was time to rest while she waited for the call, and they would choose a new leader in the grove, and then she, Makoni, would leave the grove in someone's hands, and she would be free to rest. So at that morning's assembly, she arrived early and waited for everyone else to arrive. She saw Yemu as the young woman walked head bowed to her seat, and Makoni watched her, hoping to see something, some malice, some hidden agenda, but her face was so innocent, so unworldly, that everyone who saw it would see a sweet heart. When eventually the whole staff of the grove, about 40 in all, found seats and sat, Makoni looked at each of them in turn: seers, prophets, healers, assistants, learners, herbalists, potion makers, all of them with rare, different gifts, some having forsaken their whole pasts to dedicating their lives to saving the individuals brought here from far and wide because their families could find no one else, and each dedicated to imparting new knowledge to new batches of the Gru's recruits. Makoni couldn't have been prouder. They had done a good thing here, and it was time for her to pass it on. So she spoke with a smile on her face. Family members of the grove, the time is now come for me to rest. I have served generations and generations in this grove, and I believe that with each group I have imparted the best of my knowledge in herbs, in anatomy, and in rare treatments. But now my body is tired, and I long to spend the rest of my life in rest. So now I ask you, my people, to choose a new leader to take over the grove, and that you do it as soon as possible so that I can rest. I do not intend to interfere with the process with which you will choose my successor, but I do warn you that I and my fellow dearly departed co-founders placed enough enchantments around this grove that only a person who has mastery of and over the human body, who has unyielding ethics, and who is fearless who leads this grove. I have worked with most of you here, and I know you all possess most of these qualities, so I refuse to be the one to choose, but to let you choose amongst yourselves. Everyone is eligible for the race. Is that understood? Several hands shot into the air even as people murmured amongst themselves. But amongst the hands in the air was Yemurai's, and Makoni used all the restraint in her body to not ignore the youngster. Yes, the old woman said through gritted teeth as she pointed at Yemu. You. Great healer, our elder, the young woman said, you mentioned that everyone is eligible. Does that include me, considering that I am the newest recruit? The rest of the healers coughed at the preposterousness of the question, and Makoni wanted to laugh too, but she knew too that one of the tenets of the grove was non-discrimination, and the crone answered, yes, you are a part of the Grove family as anyone else. Should you pass whatever test that you all come up with to become the leader, and as long as you demonstrate mastery in healthcare, then you can lead. But the rest of the crowd laughed, knowing that there was no way with this girl with absolutely no inkling between poisonous and non-poisonous herbs, no knowledge of what potions worked on which patients, would become the great elder of the Healer's Grove. After answering all questions regarding the test, to which most of your responses were, decide amongst yourselves what the test will be, Makoni stood, telling the healers it was time to return to their stations and patients. Makoni had just gotten into her heart and was just checking on the patient that lay close to her head when there was a knock by her door. Startled and not wanting any other person to find her harboring a patient in her heart when there was already an infirmary for patients nearby, the older woman asked, who is it? It's me, Yamurai, the knocker called out. Makoni sighed. This girl was intent on being a problem, but then she called out, "If you are alone, come in." Makoni saw the young woman's gaze fall briefly on the patient as she walked closer. Then she turned to Makoni and drew closer to kneel before her. "Good morning, elder," she said. "We have already greeted each other at the assembly, child, and there is no need for you to come and kneel before me. We are equals here, equals because of our ability to heal. So sit and state the purpose of your visit." "Elder," Yemu said after she had seated herself on a bench in the hut, "I have come to apologize to you for what I did, bringing a stranger into our midst. I know I should have come to tell you the moment I saw him lying by the river, but he was so gravely wounded, I feared he would pass before you decided what to do with him. I am really sorry. I overstepped my boundaries." Makoni looked at the girl, and again she could not help but shiver in your presence. There was just something about her that whispered warning signals, but Makoni could not tell what it was, because by all appearances the girl looked sincere, almost harmless. But Makoni needed to know more, so she probed. "I know you and I have not had a real chat since you got here, as you are under instruction from the healers, so I have never asked you what your gift does or how it comes. I just know from what your mother told me that you predict who is going to fall and how they will end. Right, but what happens for you to see that? What triggers your gift?" "I don't know," the girl said slowly. "I just know that sometimes when I sleep, the visions come, clear as day, and then a few days later, they come to pass. I know too that sometimes if I brush across a person in the street, or shake their hands in greeting, or just come into contact with them in any way, if their day of passing is near, it will flash in my eyes, which is why I decided to save the stranger, because when I touched him, I did not see his passing." Makoni nodded, then asked with forced mirth, "So what day is my passing day?" Yemu shook her head. "I can only see for those who are about to end." Makoni nodded again. "I can see why this is a dangerous gift for you. Nobody wants to be told they are vulnerable. But you came to the right place where we can teach you to tame that gift. I will assign Tangai, the seer, to take care of that so that whenever you see a person ending, you might be able to assist them with the right treatments and warnings. Okay?" Yemu nodded and said, "Okay. And promise me that whatever decision you have to make in this compound is not an arbitrary one, but you have to consult with me first," Makoni said, "or even with any of the elder instructors in the grove. Okay?" Again Yemu nodded, and Makoni could not help but feel an unfamiliar cold hand clutch at her heart and stones rising in her throat. Was it jealousy that made it difficult for her to warm up to this young, beautiful girl? Was she envious that the girl had youth, self-assurance, and a gift that was untouched, all things that she, Makoni, didn't have anymore? Or was it a coldness inspired by that vision and her suspicions that this was the girl who could tear the grove apart, rent it into two? And yet, before she could find the answers to this question, the two of them were startled by the movement at the hearth. They had already forgotten about the patient, but now as he stirred and moaned, they froze, watching him for a while. Two heartbeats later, he had started to stir restlessly, and both rose, Makoni forgetting her stiff joints and rushing to him. He stopped moving when he saw two faces hovering over him and looked up at each face intensely, as though seeing human faces for the first time. Then he turned to Makoni again, and this time his face changed, and a grimace came over it, and he reached for her wrist with his calloused palm, and he clasped it so tightly that Makoni yelped in pain and tried to shake her hand off. But his grasp was too strong for such a frail body, and eventually she gave up and stared at him, her gaze strong, as though daring him to speak. "Finally, I find you a great healer," he spoke at last. "Who are you?" Makoni asked. He laughed, his voice still raging with delirium. Then he said, "I am your past, the past you ran away from." Makoni forced herself to laugh and said, "You must be tired from all the potions they are feeding you, young man. I think you need to sleep. We can talk when you are feeling better." But the young man laughed and said, "I know who you are. I know what you are hiding." Makoni's eyes quickly flicked over to Yemu, who was now watching her intently. She did not know what this young man knew, but she had no desire for Yemu, of all people, to hear what was being said. So she quickly turned to him and said, "Rest now, child. Save your energy. We can talk after you recuperate." But now he was scrambling for something on his chest, and he grasped the long chain that lay there, and he pulled it out of the ropes that Matirasa had wrapped him in, and there, by the tail end of the chain, was a whistle-shaped locket, and he brought it closer to Makoni's face. Makoni gasped as she looked at it, and felt the air leave her body for a moment. She knew the locket. She had seen it before. She had held it in her hands before, for there were only two of these the world over, and the other one hung by her neck, and after the calabash was the second only prized possession she had fled home with when she left. And here, over 70 reigns since she had left her home, here was its replica. "Who are you?" she asked through a trembling voice. "Where are you from?" But his attention had left Makoni's face, and with the hand that had let the chain go, he clasped Yemu's hand so tightly that she yelped. Then he whispered, "Please don't go. Please don't leave me now. Otherwise, this old hag will finish me off today." And Yemu looked from his face to Makoni's face, and the older healer looked like she had seen 1,000 phantoms. To be continued. Thank you guys for watching and for watching all the way to the end. I appreciate you being here. This story is part of a series of stories set in a pre-colonial African hospital, and it explores the intrigue and mystery surrounding the hospital and its characters. Please do tune in next week, same time, for the next installment. Also, do not forget to comment, to like, to subscribe, and to share with your friends. Lots of love and bye.